All right, welcome to the September metrics meeting. It is fall. We have a few welcomes. We've got Ellery in analytics. I don't know if she's here today. I'm so sorry. I allow myself at least one gaffe per metrics meeting. And Anne, who is finally on board as a conversion. And then we have two legal interns that are new. Where are they? Raise your hand back there. We have Claire and Hillary.
Okay, great. So we'll get started with a quick view into the monthly metrics, and Lila is going to give an update on organizational strategy. We'll have a quick update on the media viewer and recent changes that are being prepared, as well as an update on SUL. So it's going to be a relatively short meeting, but we have a lot of room for questions on the strategy presentation by Lila. So starting with the top-level metrics, so we've looked at this for a while, and in the last few months, you've noticed that this ComScore uniques measure is trending down in a pretty dangerous manner. And I sent you guys a note saying that the one big caveat on this number is that the way ComScore works, they measure global uniques using panels. And the way their measurement works is also that they are heavily desktop focused, and they only have started offering mobile measurements recently for some markets, and they are not even included in this measure. For a long time, we've had no access to ComScore's mobile data. It's pretty expensive, and honestly, given that it's fairly limited, it's not something that we wanted to invest in. But at the same time, they have given us a sneak preview of some of the data that we're going to look at today. So to put the uniques on desktop that you see as reported by ComScore in perspectives with their measurement on mobile. So for that reason, I'm going to ask Dario to give a quick view into the ComScore measure.
All right. You guys hear me? No. Hello? Hello? Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Thanks, Eric. So as Eric said, we've been monitoring the situation with page views, but today I wanted to take a better look at the data we get from ComScore about unique visitors. So this is a report card, and you can see this downward trend in the last couple of months. Really, the first half of 2014 was a tipping point in unique visitors measured by ComScore, and this particularly affected, in terms of regions, Europe and North America. And this may not look particularly dramatic, but that's because it's a log scale, right? So if you move to a linear scale, and okay, that's partly cheating because lim doesn't include the origin, so it's a truncated graph. But still, we're talking of, in terms of regional traffic, of a drop in desktop unique visitors of about 30% from the beginning of the year. So it's pretty massive, and in 6 months, that's pretty scary, right? So what the hell is going on here? Like Eric was saying, historically we haven't collected unique visitors in-house for two main reasons, one being technical, the other one related to the privacy policy. At the same time, for a long time, ComScore only provided desktop numbers for uniques, at least until now. So last week, a new tab magically appeared on our ComScore accounts, displaying for the first time new regional reports for mobile. And these are limited to some markets, so we don't have global numbers. But I wanted to give big props to Caroline. I know she's here. She's not, but basically she managed to negotiate with ComScore access to this data. So we're really grateful to have the first external take on how we're doing on mobile in terms of uniques. And the numbers, specifically for North America, don't look good. Or, well, depending on how you look at this, they may look good for part of our projects. So this is a plot of a unique visitor. So comparing the unique visitor numbers you saw for desktop, so that's a blue line, with the newest unique visitor numbers we get for mobile devices. And what this plot shows is that in the US, according to this data, which comes with a ton of caveats, in the last 2-3 months, Wikimedia has become a mobile site first in the US. And as you can imagine, these are some important consequences on our products, our fundraising strategy, et cetera, et cetera. This is a plot that shows the reach. So what it shows is that currently mobile unique visitors represent 36%, again, according to this data, of the total US mobile audience, whereas desktop is around 25% of the total desktop audience in terms of unique visitors. And so, like I said, there's a ton of caveats that we need to be aware of. So first off, unique visitors are not unique individuals. Eric Zachte asked me to remind this, and I think it's super important that we try and be careful about what we call unique visitors. ComScore does not provide longitudinal or global data. Like I said, this is only limited to a specific market or set of markets. We don't have the equivalent of a worldwide uniques as we do for desktop. And we also don't have a full longitudinal series, so it's very hard to reconstruct long-term trends based on this data. The data is based on extrapolations from a panel of users, which comes with extra complications because these are really individual users opting in that then ComScore controls for in terms of the demographic, and so they perform some extrapolation based on the segments in this population, and this methodology comes with a ton of interesting statistical problems. And finally, there are segments of the population that we know are excluded. So particularly minors of 18-year-old for the desktop site and 14-year-old 18-year-old for the mobile site and 14 for the desktop site are not included. We have reasons to think that we have a large population of school kids using Wikipedia. So this is not included in these reports. So what's next? We're working both in research and the analytics active team on building an in-house set of metrics, including unique clients. And we're going to start with apps as our first use case. We're evaluating a number of options to make sure that they're technically feasible and also respectful of our privacy policy. We'll be generating reports from the unsampled request logs that we started collecting for the first time and storing in Hadoop. And what this is going to lead us to a better understanding of access as a function of the source of traffic, the region of traffic, the device class, and the method by which people access our sites. And that's about it for my update. Any questions? When? Toby? Or Kevin?
Mike.
We're working with the mobile team right now to get this nailed down. They will have some sort of update at their metrics meeting on the 25th. We're working with Michelle to deal with the privacy implications of this and make sure that our community is comfortable with what we're doing. I think we have a clear call to action here about why we need to do this, which is, I think, comforting. And at the next metrics meeting, Kevin will show a demo of our dashboard for showing our key trends that will be available publicly.
Hey Dario, can you go to the reach slide? So that's actually quite a sharp downwards trend from January in reach, like from about 46% to 36%. Do we know, so we've only got a few months worth of data here. Do we expect this to be seasonality, or is it actually, was there something that we did in February that annoyed people?
So it's super hard, it's a good question. It's super hard to tell for many reasons. First, they only have this data going back to the beginning of 2014. So we don't have any source of data to perform seasonality analysis. Second, they're also changing the definition of what counts as mobile traffic. So for example, some iOS devices were not included until March in their mobile reports. So I'm not sure I can answer the question without digging more into their methodology.
Dario, when we look at seasonal trends of our ComScore data from the past, the ones that we just record and keep, does this correlate, this graph, this smile correlate to those year over year?
I'm not sure for reach. I think we've never really studied reach in terms of unique visitors and page views. We see the typical seasonality dip that happens in June, and we typically see July as having like an increase with respect to June. So what we don't see, and that's a deviation from the trend, is the drop we've seen since the beginning of the year. Basically, that's a pretty robust indication that there's something that goes against the seasonality.
So I also want to again remind folks, so you cannot overstate the amount of caveats on this data just because of how it is derived, and this is the actual page view trend that we get from our own measurement right now. So this actually shows any view that comes from any device to our websites aggregated into one measure. And you do see the big drop here that happened last year that we have recovered from mostly. Through the entirety of 2014, so far the overall page view trends across projects combined and across device methods combined is stable. So don't take away from this. If you look at this, that's very scary. That doesn't include mobile. So even if you factor in mobile into this graph, it's going to look very different. And certainly our own measurement looks very different as far as like what the actual traffic trends in our projects are. So it's important not to overinterpret this data, but what I think is relevant and what we can take away from it is that we're definitely seeing this trend that we're seeing on many other websites and services, that mobile is really, really, really taking over. And obviously that does have to impact our product strategy in pretty significant ways.
If we were talking about trends alone, you can see the dip here. So right after about mid-year, right before here. So if you were to smooth the graph, you'll see that.
Yeah, so the seasonality is there's definitely a lot of seasonality in the data, and you guys have done some analysis specifically of that, right?
Yeah, we have a report about seasonality around page views that we ran earlier this year, so we can share this with you. And in terms of caveats, it's also worth pointing out that page views does include spurious, like non-human traffic. So that's the other important caveat we need to take into account when we're talking about this data. So yeah, I guess the bottom line is that we need to better understand what's happening with traffic, and we are fully on board with a ton of resources to do that.
Cool. So let's move on. Lila is going to give an update on some of the conversations that have happened in the last few weeks around the development of the organization strategy. Lila?
Thank you. Thanks for this. There you go. Thank you, Dario. So as you can see, we have a lot of things to learn, and if those of you who have been to these meetings, the last 3 ones, I've been highlighting the trends like these. We definitely need to understand what is happening. But it's not just enough to understand the numbers, which we absolutely need to understand, and this is why the team is looking very carefully to have the data internally. It's also important to understand where we're going, and not only where we're going ourselves, but also where we're going in the context of the wider world, where our users are going, what they are doing. So when I got here in June, when I stepped into this role, the first thing that we've done is we got together as an executive team and we started talking about, okay, well, what are our goals? What are we trying to achieve? And it became very rapidly very clear that it was impossible to decide on the next step or meaningful next step if we didn't know what was the destination. And we decided at that point that we needed to kick off the strategy process that has been due. So I wanted to give you a brief preview of what we are planning to do this fall and how we're planning to work together with all of you and the community at large to help us define this kind of next vision, next step, and the direction in which we're going. So with that, I wanted to start by bringing you back to this really typical business statement of what strategy actually is. And I'm sorry for doing this to you, but I feel like it's really important for us to be on the same page what we mean by strategy. Because what we've had before is not quite what I would call what typical strategy would look like and what we need. There are a few highlighted words. I'll let you just read through the statement. And I'll highlight them, I'll explain them for you. The important pieces here is that we're doing something that is unique. Yay, we are. It is valuable. Yes, we do. It can be preserved. Well, we certainly hope so. And we do it through a different set of activities. And we're doing it longer term. Right? So this statement needs to be valid through years and years of us working together and working towards something. So there's three major components of any strategy. There's the vision. So we need to revisit and remind ourselves what that is so that we don't start deviating. We need to continually do that. That is our unique proposition. What is that we do for the world? Leadership. It's the people who are leading the effort, right? And one of the most important things about leadership is enforcing the trade-offs. It's saying no to things. It's saying no to things that we cannot do in order for us to do things that we need to do. And it's also the burden of communication very much lies on the leadership. The most important piece actually is the operations, the day-to-day activities that we as an organization implement and how we do them and how do we combine them and who's responsible for what, and the clarity of those responsibilities are really valuable. Without that, we cannot get to the destination. So in order to kind of make it a little bit more real for you guys, and for all of us, let's look at our last strategy that had a lot of good in it, a lot of good activities that were part of us developing it. It was a professionally done, deep exercise with a lot of involvement, and it took us a long time to get there. And a few things that we really kick-started back then. We started looking at the data. That was the time when we started to really dig in, and that was really, really important because data is what should be driving our decisions to a large extent. We engaged community at a large scale to get a wide buy-in, and we've done it in a very well-designed, pragmatic manner. What do we think we've missed? What can we improve on? It ended up being not a strategy, but a set of goals, and that's a very different thing. To me, I joke sometimes, it reminds me of a 5-year plan that we used to have in the Soviet Union. We used to have this slogan, 5 years and 4, and there would be goals associated with that. We would never hit the goals. It's just because it's static, right? Things change every day, and we need to be much more agile in how we adopt and change and pivot around obstacles that we see in front of us. So it ends up being unrealistic. Right? It ends up setting some goals out there that they're not even predictable 5 years ahead of time, and as a result, misalignment with execution occurs. So what people are doing on an everyday basis is very far removed from the original goals that we've set, and that's what we're to a great extent. Those are the few problems that we've suffered from. So another one of those crazy charts. There's an idea of where we're going to go, and we need to get that. We need to come back and say, okay, well, yes, this is the direction we wanna head to. This is where the compass is pointing. But through everyday activities and through ideas that emerge from the world and from things that we see on an everyday basis, each one of you will see them. The new direction, the final destination is going to change. And this is the very important component. This emergent piece is critical. And this is why strategy is not something that a couple of executives decide in a corner office. It is something that every single person, every single one of you, and and our community volunteers need to participate in. So where are we? We know what makes us unique. We need to clarify what activities play to our strengths, and even more importantly so, which ones do not. What is it that we are willing to cut out? So some of the ideas about where we're going. I think it's really important. In a session that I did at Wikimedia, I said we need to keep imagining. So the next step is actually try to figure out what is it that we want to, want to do in the next 5 years. Do we want to do more of the same? Do we need to make some decisions about whether we're a destination or platform? So there's interesting data that's showing us that this may be a shifting in the world. Are we going toward data or encyclopedic knowledge? Do we want to be mobile first or maybe mobile only? You know, there could be really radical things that we were thinking about. Do we want to be an integrated system or a set of standalone projects? Should we be changing how we're thinking about that? Right? Should it be an integrated connection of multiple things that we're doing? Should Wikidata and dictionaries and source and encyclopedias play together in a much better way? The options are literally unlimited, and this is what we need to work through together. So Eric likes this. So when I first started conceptualizing this, I was thinking about it as a kind of food pyramid, right? If we think of knowledge as a pyramid where the facts and the cold facts and the formulas are on the top, and opinions are on the bottom, we live somewhere pretty close here. Right? So we go from data and facts to encyclopedia, research, editorial, and opinion. And when we think about strategy and we're thinking which direction to go, we can think about, okay, do we go more towards the top, more towards the bottom, do we expand? It's a useful tool for me to think about, to conceptualize and explain how we think about knowledge. Because one of the things that we came back with when we met with the wider group is the definition of knowledge is extremely vast. So we need to focus on what is it that we mean by it. And as we come back, I think it's really important to figure this out from the perspective of what is it that, from the WMF perspective, once we understand or we agree on our vision for this next step, how do we actually ensure that this happens? And as I was saying before, the real innovation actually doesn't come strictly from us. It comes from, and it won't come from us, it comes from the users. And every successful transformation, every successful innovation knows that the only way for us to figure this out is to enable our community and to enable our users to build these innovations and to imagine and to create them. And you know, this is just one of the examples of, and Eric will walk us through a few of them, of thinking about how we can build the toolkit, the platform, to enable these innovations to occur both internally at WMF and everywhere else in the world.
So this is something that the mobile team is currently working on. So it's not actually the 5-year horizon as much as it is the week's horizon, but I think it points in the direction of the kinds of things that we need to be thinking about. So this is a project that the mobile team is experimenting with, which actually goes beyond editing as we know it. So the idea here is to invite users to make very simple factual determinations that are directly contributed to Wikidata when you look at an article in Wikipedia. So to get you into a workflow where you can potentially make hundreds of these mini contributions very quickly, and
I really can't be in the same room together, clearly.
and get people to actually get addicted to this, frankly, and to do lots and lots and lots and lots of these micro contributions, which really challenges the way that we think about editing. Now, when you contribute this kind of data, it can then be used in a number of new ways in how we present information and how we manage and organize it. So it's a very powerful potential feedback loop that we can create. And as we think about like the future of knowledge and the future of our role in this space, we really have to be thinking about editing very differently than we have so far. Like it's very clear that contributing to the encyclopedic body of knowledge, even if we address all the usability issues, is going to remain something that's very challenging and that only is going to be attractive to some people. That doesn't mean that we won't continue to support it, but it does mean that we have to also think about new ways to contribute knowledge that are more open and that bring more people into the community.
Yeah, and one thing to add is that as we see the form factors of interaction change, we need to be thinking through what does it mean to how people interact with knowledge and how people contribute. Even the core contributing body, even the people who are used to contributing the way they contribute today, as they shift to different types of devices, they're going to be presented with just different types of challenges. You know, all of a sudden, you know, your finger is just too big for a particular button.
So another example that you may have seen, and you may have met these folks at Wikimedia this year, this is a project called Historypedia. And Historypedia compiles information from Wikidata into timelines. And it allows you to actually look at the mobile version of the Wikipedia article relevant to any of these items on the timeline. It gives you a new way to interact with information. It is notable, especially for one reason. It is, as far as I know, the first major third-party application built on top of Wikidata. A few, actually now already like 7, 8, 9 years ago, we started to see this kind of thing happen with Wikipedia. Now we're starting to see this happen with Wikidata, that people are taking this data and building applications on top of it. So this is happening, it's now. And you may have met this guy at Wikimedia. He's a wonderful guy. He's the original developer of the PHP version of MediaWiki. He is based in the UK now, and he has been the originator of countless innovations, including Reasonator, including a Wikidata query system, including a Wikidata-based timeline, including the Wikidata game, which was an inspiration for this thing. And the reason I'm bringing him up here and putting him in the spotlight is this really underscores an important point. Magnus doesn't work for the foundation. He's not actually interested in doing that. He wants to keep his volunteer work separate from his professional work. He loves doing it in his spare time. And we need to support people like Magnus doing the things that they do, but we also need to give them better ways to take those things to the level where they are products, where they are things that people can use every day, so that there's not this detached way for us to work together. A volunteer creates something and then we'll be like, oh, we can do this better. Rather, how can we actually partner effectively on innovations, on disruptive changes?
Also identify them and figure out which ones that work and make them part of the total body of our projects. Because software, you know, it's you have to maintain it. It's a living thing, and it needs to be redone every now and then. You know, those of you who are in software know that most of it gets rewritten every 3 to 5 years. So we need to make sure that there's a full pipeline that comes from innovation and goes into productization and eventually and potentially into the core.
Back to you.
So a few early observations on this. A few things that we need to think about, and you feel free to disagree at this point, but we need to create some preconditions for people to build amazing things that we can't yet imagine, both here and elsewhere. And the reality is they're already being built today. We're just not really leveraging the power of them, and oftentimes we're actually creating more problems than we're solving as a result. We need to partner in a way that innovations do not languish, but also be able to figure out which ones to invest in and put our efforts in and time, and which ones to say no to. That's okay too. That's part of the equation. we need to become a client of our own platform. I told earlier, Dario was telling me, "Oh yeah, we're not all, we're not using our own APIs, our own services in a few in some places." And I'm like, Dario, don't make Lila cry. So don't make me cry. Use our own platform and own the core experiences. So the platform is important. We provide that component, and we need to invest in it, and we need to make sure that it is solid and consistent and up to date. We need to think beyond the editing as we know it today. And I don't want you to misunderstand this. This is not, it doesn't mean that the editing as it exists today is not important. It means that what I'm trying to say here is that that's not the only thing that's important. Because as the new generation of information users is emerging, and as they're learning entirely different ways. They're using the internet differently. If you have children, you're already experiencing that because they're way ahead of you on how they use the mobile devices, and they can figure it out much faster. And then we need to prepare for that world of the users that are coming online and that are learning, that living with Wikipedia today. Wikipedia 10 years ago was something new. Now it's part of what every kid knows, right? So how do we bring them into the fold? Okay. So what does this mean? What are the deliverables? We're missing a slide, I think.
No. This is what you got.
There was a piece that was talking about how we're going to engage and what do we need from you. I think it's probably in different order.
Further down.
Yeah. So the deliverables of the whole strategy process, which we are going to go into this fall, about to open it up to everybody, are basically three major things. The statement of direction. This is kind of, okay, we're going north, south, east, west, whatever. The other piece is public participatory process for ongoing iteration. What that actually means is that it's not something that we're going to do once. It's effectively a repeated schedule of different things that we want to do on a regular basis. So for example, once a year, we're going to want to re-look at our statement of direction, let's say. We may want to redo the environmental scan, which means we want to understand, okay, where other different companies are, what's happening there, is somebody embedding our data, is there no new type of device that's using it. That needs to be, those different tasks need to be done repeatedly. So we need to create a process around that. And then finally, we need to have an updated scorecard or report card with annual and quarterly view into it. So we need to be very clear about what are our goals for the year, what are our goals for the quarter, and who's responsible for them, and what are the specific metrics around them. So this is where you all come in. So what are we going to ask from you? We're going to ask you to brainstorm on how people will interact with technology, how they interact with it today already that's different from the way we understand it currently or understood it in the past. How will they interact with information technology, and how is that interaction is changing? And this is more of a brainstorming exercise that will be open to everybody on Wiki. We want to help in identifying external opportunities and threats to our mission and our project. We want your help to map out our internal strengths and weaknesses as you perceive them. We want you to influence those metrics and those high-level goals that we're going to distill from that. And then, obviously, we're all going to make that actually happen. So the key milestones look like this. There's a bunch of work, framework work that has been pre-done. Some of you have been involved with it directly just to figure out what the process looks like and what are the things that we want out of it. Starting in September, and you can see the version numbers, they're kind of like a software version number, 0.1, 0.2, working towards alpha, working towards beta. starting in September, we're gonna open this publicly. Basically, launch the public process for getting the comments and getting thoughts and getting input. And through September through November, that will be up for consultation revisions. Okay, and we're hoping that by November we will come out with some of the deliverables that we are speaking about on the top chart. Give the board an opportunity to review it, and not like they'll also be able to engage during the consultation process. And then by early Q1, we want to have our first revised scorecard complete. All of this will be done in the public. All of this will be done with your input and community input, and this is the high-level overview. Questions, comments? I think we have time. Eric, how are we doing on?
Hey, is this working? So both of the examples that you guys showed are very heavily dependent on Wikidata, obviously. Is there any plans to like bring Wikidata into this buildings fold so as we build products that are dependent on Wikidata and are building on top of Wikidata, we can work with that team more succinctly and more explicitly?
So let me just describe the current state for people who are not familiar with it. So right now, Wikidata development is done by Wikimedia Germany, which is an independent chapter organization. There's a team of about 10 people who do all of the development work, which is awesome. And frankly, I don't think Wikidata would have happened if we had tried to do it ourselves, mostly because we would have been too distracted to try to do other things at the same time. The fact that they've been able to focus on just that one technology project has been really key to making it happen and moving it forward. And I think we need to be careful not to forget that lesson as we think about disruptive innovations. That is actually one of the tools of disruptions, is to help have others take on challenges and work with you. But the lack of internal ownership on integration as well as ongoing relationship management is a huge issue. So right now, so far, most of the integration work on a technical level has been managed by Rob's team and points of contacts like Rob himself and people in his department, and that's taken us where we are today. But what is missing is a really coherent strategy on bringing Wikidata into all our products and using it as the glue for actually connecting the different properties in the Wikimedia universe. And I think that is where a useful division of labor between the Wikidata team as it exists today, focusing on the core Wikidata capabilities, and the Wikimedia Foundation's role could emerge. It's a resourcing question, but I think that is one of the ways to solve for it. I want to highlight that at this point in time, one of the first joint integration efforts between the Wikimedia Foundation and the Wikidata team is going to be on metadata for files. And specifically, the multimedia engineering team has been now in touch with the Wikidata team for the last quarter, coordinating on how we can use the technologies developed for Wikidata to manage the mess that is metadata on Wikimedia Commons. That's just a baby step, but we are starting to make baby steps to bringing the integration efforts more closely in alignment. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think the reason Eric highlighted it is because it's one of the really nice highlights of innovations that happened outside of these walls that worked. And what we need to be doing better is identifying and enabling them and then bringing them into the fold, because right now it's not part of our overall strategy and product planning. Doesn't mean the engineering resources need to live here, but we need to be thinking about it from the UX and product perspective, which means that we need to be allocating resources to it, right, from that point of view, and helping manage it as part of the integrated product.
Other questions, comments?
Hey, so there's a question from Mark in IRC asking, is your recommendation that we divest ourselves of external tools and focus more on wikis as part of focusing on what we produce ourselves? Like dropping Google Docs and going to use wikis, things like that?
Oh, I want us to be really careful about focusing on our core expertise. Our core expertise is around creating and sharing knowledge with the world, right? Through, and specifically, more specifically, encyclopedic knowledge. So I don't want us to get into reinventing tools that we don't necessarily need directly for the type of work that we and our community are doing together. So I want to be really careful about saying, we're gonna build our own routers or something like that.
Yeah, I think Mark was specifically asking about things like Google Docs, and I think there is obviously a fair bit of overlap between what Google Docs does and what a wiki is intended to do. And I think the big question for us as we go into the next 3 to 5 years is how much effort we spend on making that sort of traditional desktop-focused collaboration tooling really, really, really awesome versus like thinking of new ways to make very efficient, quick edits on mobile. Like if you build an editing tool mobile first, it's not clear that you would end up necessarily with the visual editor approach of like document level manipulation. You might be focused more on sentence and paragraph level manipulation as a first sort of way to get people to be drawn in and make quick changes. So that is probably going to be more of a question of focus for us is where do we put more energy in the technologies for the traditional styles of collaboration or the new mobile-focused collaboration modes that we need to support. But I don't think any question that we need to continue to put lots and lots of efforts into collaboration technology. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense for me. The interesting part is as I'm speaking with some of our community members, it becomes pretty clear. The way that Wikipedia works today is very much a word editor. In many ways, right? You can do anything you want. You can cut, paste paragraphs, move them around, on the talk pages. Things you can do it. It's completely unbounded as far as that goes, right? It's basically, just like editing, HTML page, and that's. On one hand, this is what people are used to, no constraints. On the other hand, for new users, that's actually a problem. If you think about it, new users are lost when they come to our site. Some of the data that we're seeing is that 9 out of 10 of them will click on the edit button and leave immediately. Immediately. This is the new user, right? Actually, I think it even includes the current user statistic. So that tells us that while constraints are, we currently perceive that no constraints and as a potentially a bad thing for new users, that's like training wheels. So we need to be thinking about how do we marry those two?
What's the question about who is the we that you mean when you say we?
So when we talk about the strategy, specifically it's a WMF strategy. I want to make that really, really clear. When we talk about we as thinking through this, I'm speaking about we as all of us who are interested and engaged in the future of Wikimedia. So that includes community, it includes anybody who basically cares.
Okay. Last question, Adam?
Yeah, so let's say, for example, I had some disruptive ideas, but I don't have the volunteer time to prototype and evangelize these. Do we have any structures that we're creating to discuss, nurture, collect, that sort of thing?
So I'm not sure about the structures today. We have some basic structures, I believe, for suggestions. And bear in mind that this is not a final product, so we don't know what it's going to look like. But I believe that part of the process should be just a gathering, accumulation of the ideas. We need to get more proactive about how we think through the ideation process.
If we think about also the way, for example, the engineering and product development organizational structure needs to change. What we're looking for and what we're thinking about is a model that enables us to build a good balance between having like very clearly identified high-level objectives that we reach, but also a continued bubbling up of ideas and projects that people want to pursue and take to completion. So finding that balance is tricky, and almost all tech organizations struggle with that, but it's certainly something that we want to build into the organizational design more explicitly. Vibber has one question, and that's the last one before we move on.
I wanted to just go back to micro contributions. I think that site quality is obviously really important, and we've sort of just started trying micro contributions out. Image uploads was the first one that we did on mobile web, and while it didn't really work out, I think we had a good amount of learning from it. I wanted to understand, so I think that we should all be aware that like the first few micro contributions may not be 100% success, and they may create some vandalism, and site quality is really important to all of us. So like, what is our commitment to sort of experimenting with these new ways of editing? Because the first few ones are not going to hit the sweet spot. It's going to be a learning process, just like long form editing. So just kind of want to hear from you guys about how you think about commitment to trying these experiments.
So experiments are invaluable, right? We're not going to be able to figure things out without experimentation. That said, I want to go back to how we actually call systemic thinking, right? So when we experiment, we can't just throw things at the wall and expect it to stick. We need to be thinking, what is the downstream effect of what we do? So when we do something like image uploads or any kind of edits, we need to be thinking about what is the next step? Who's going to be seeing this? How is that going to be processed? We need to think through the entire, pipeline of the editing. And we tend to think of the spot right now. We tend to think of just one station as this train goes through. But the reality is it's going to come in, we're going to grab an edit. It's going to go and somebody is going to look at it and make sure that it's valid. And if we overwhelm those people, we're going to run into trouble there. So we need to be thinking through every stage, through every stop as that train goes through. That doesn't mean that we don't experiment. It just means that we think our experimentations through. This is the reason why we don't put a big blue edit button on our screen right now. Right? If we wanted to, we could staff a bunch of new editors. We could get a bunch of people clicking on the edit. If we really wanted to, it's very, very doable. The problem is that the very next stop on the very next train station of that train is going to be a massive failure, because those people are not going to know what to do next after clicking that button. That's why we're not turning that spigot on. And every experimentation that we do need to be thought through that way.
Okay, well, thank you, Laila. Let's move on to the next item in the agenda, which is a presentation from Fabrice. You probably have been reading some of the emails around MediaViewer and some of the pains of the deployment and the rollout and the community response to that. So Fabrice is going to give an update on some of the recent research and development work that has been done, as well as some of the next steps.
Thanks, Eric. First, a reminder, why are we doing this? So the goal is to improve the viewing experience for readers and casual editors. So we're a little bit louder? Okay. So we are trying to improve the viewing experience for readers and casual editors and make it easier for them to preview and browse images while providing them a quick summary and easy access to the details on the file page. So the problem that we found, particularly for readers, is that right now the file page that you see here is voluminous. It offers a lot more information than the reader really wants. They typically just want to see the image with a little bit of information. And it often is on a separate site or on a duplicate page, so it creates a lot of confusion. It's great for power users, but it's not ideal for readers. So you can see how this is represented here. Here's the file page. In order to get the information, you got to scroll down and dig in. So what we try to do, as you see in the next slide, is provide this information in a more compact format by just giving you the basic information that you want. So essentially, Media Viewer is presented as a way to preview the images, and if you want more information, you can go all the way to the file page. And the benefits of the Media Viewer in the file page are that the Media Viewer seems really appropriate for readers and casual editors, or when you just want to browse, when you're in that mood. And the file page seems to be really ideal for experienced editors, advanced users, or when you have to do some work and some research. So we want to support both of those viewing options, and we aim to do this with the next version. So we've done a lot of community and research work over the last year tens of thousands of users have contributed to either the engagement or the research work that we've done. And in the next slides, you can see kind of the input we've gotten from the surveys. We found out that people really want to Zoom. They want a way to opt out. They want to be able to scroll. In the next slide, the talk page, a lot of people want it to be opt-in. They can't find the file page link. They want the caption higher up. In the next one, we did some user studies in July, and people are having some problems discovering some of the information. They couldn't find the download button. So we took all of this input, and we spent some time with Pao and the rest of the team coming up with a new design, which we'd like to demo now. So the new design at the lower left here shows us on the alpha prototype a typical article. We click on a particular image, such as this one, and it opens up in the media viewer.
Theoretically.
Should open in media viewer.
There we go.
And the image is provided. Right below the image is a little caption, so you can read about the image right away. You still have the author information and the license, which has been moved down, and you've got a big blue More Details button that takes you to the file page, so people can't find the details now have a much more accessible way to do this. And maybe if we could browse through the next image. A lot of people wanted the ability to zoom. So now, if you move your cursor over this map and you want to see a detail, you can just click on it, and that takes you to the browser zoom, which should allow you to zoom in further. I'm not sure why in this particular configuration it doesn't work, but
it's a prototype.
Yeah, it's a prototype. Anyway, you can now zoom in and use the browser zoom functions, and people really appreciate that, and they find it very intuitive to click on the image to do this. Everyone seems to really love the ability to browse through a variety of images. And one more thing that I'd like to point out is, given that we're trying to limit the space below the image, if you have a description that's particularly long and you want to be able to see it, you can just click on the ellipsis and you can expand that information as well. And this is something that people had no problem discovering, and they felt pretty comfortable doing this. And then last but not least, we have separated the download button because people were having a hard time finding how to download files. And then we now have the share and the embed tool. This is what used to be called use this file. And again, we're finding that people seem to be able to use this. The one thing that many power users requested is, how do I disable this tool? We now have a cog icon at the top right corner, which makes it possible for you to have a easy way to disable. By making it more prominent, users had no problem finding out how to do it. We still need to do some tweaks on the exact flow. But this gives you kind of an idea of what we've been working on and what we have been testing. And if we go back to the slides, I'll show you at a glance the conclusions of the report that Abby is preparing now. Basically, all of the tasks that we tested seemed usable by the various users that work with us, and we're very grateful to Abby and to Daisy for all their hard work last week, making time for us to help us validate that these new designs actually accomplish their goals. So you notice the pattern here. A lot of community engagement through a variety of channels. We try to test before we make the design improvement. We try to test after we make the design improvement. And if you look at the next slide, you'll get kind of a sense of what we're proposing to do next in terms of improvements. So the detail button, that's a no-brainer. We're going to add it in. The caption, we're definitely going to look at this. The enlarge function, we're going to do some more work on the disable and the enable flow. The toughest challenge right now is how can we help readers re-enable the media viewer. It's tricky, and so we're putting some design cycles as well as a little bit of engineering to try to figure out how to do this. The rest of it is pretty straightforward. On the licensing front, we've been working diligently with Gergo to try to close all the loops. There are still a lot of files out there that have weird metadata in a different template than the standard template that we all support. And we're gradually closing those loops and planning to actually lead a community effort that will find the 2 million files that have like really strange or no metadata and try to add license information to those. The performance, on Thursday we'll release a new improvement that will pre-render thumbnails in the background for new images uploaded through the upload wizard that will allow us to increase the performance. And of course we'll measure every single one of those things as we have in the past, so we can verify that in fact we're doing what we hope to do. The improvement plan below will give you more information, and these are the next steps. So we've done a big round of design, a big round of user research. Now we're in a community consultation. Rachel, Keegan, and the community engagement team is doing a wonderful job soliciting suggestions of must-have features from the community that need to be incorporated in the next release. We're learning from that. It's a one-week consultation. If you haven't participated yet, we encourage you to do it. You can click on the link if you have access to the slides, or just go to Meta and search for Media Viewer Consultation. At the end of this consultation, we will update our release plan and then start development in earnest to try to provide these improvements as quickly as possible, test them, use metrics, and continue to use the iterative deployment methodology that seems to be so important to our work going forward. Questions? Emily?
Question is, who are Okay, sorry. Who are the people that participated in the survey? If you can give me an idea of like how many, and if it was a sampling of the community, if it was people from the outside, just to get a feel for those numbers. And
you're talking about the survey specifically?
Yeah.
So we used to have a button inside Media Viewer that says, please give us feedback. So anybody that was using Media Viewer could click on the button and then basically let us know if they found the tool useful or not, or add a comment. So we got comments from all over the world, from all types of user groups. About half of those were editors, about half of those were readers. About 18,000 comments. We hand-coded as many of those as we could in order to get the percentages that you saw earlier. But they seem to be more representative than the kind of folks who participate heavily on RFCs or on talk pages. It's a very different user group. The people on those talk pages tend to be more power users or very comfortable with our tools. The people responding on the surveys were very different. They were the actual readers whom we serve and the casual users whom we hope to support through this project. Question?
So one of the big items that Fabrice mentioned is the licensing and the metadata. And the current situation on our project is that if you describe a file, you can do it in free text, you can do it using a bunch of standard templates. If you use one of the current upload tools, it will generate the right templates for you. Media Viewer evaluates those templates and renders out authorship information and licensing information, provided it exists in machine-readable form. If it doesn't exist in machine-readable form, it links you back to the file page as the place to retrieve that information. We think that's a reasonable approach. It's been vetted by legal, but we also understand that people generally want that information to be visible up front as quickly as possible. So we're also looking into ways to systematically work with the community to clean up remaining files that don't have machine-readable metadata. And one of the other big upcoming projects that the multimedia team is working on, as I mentioned earlier with the Wikidata team, is to actually use potentially the Wikidata technology to manage some of that structured data in Wikimedia Commons so that we can get out of this mess of free text that is very difficult and unpredictable to parse for third-party applications. This tool simply brings that tool, that challenge into the view for lots of people who have not thought about it as much before, but it's been with us for years and years and years. Like the same issues around like attributing a file to the right person consistently. Like if you export a PDF, you'll get the same problem today. If you use WikiWand to look at an image, you'll get the same problem today. If you use any third-party integration and reuse, you'll get the same problem today. It's just an issue with the metadata of those files being incredibly inconsistent, hard to predict, difficult to parse for any third party, and in this case, we are the people trying to do it. So we have a greater obligation than, say, WikiWand to actually work with the community to help clean it up, but a mess it is nonetheless, and that is one of the biggest challenges that is coming out of those conversations.
In closing, I'd like to give a big thank you to all the community members and all the team members who've helped us with this particular product. I know that we've gone through some difficult times in recent weeks, but we're doing the best we can possibly do to try to find a happy resolution in good faith, and luckily many community members are coming and meeting us to help us make those improvements. So I'm very optimistic that we'll be able to put all this behind us and provide a better viewing experience for all of our users. Thank you.
Fabrice? We have one final update on the ever popular integration of our single user login authentication system, God's work, as I like to say.
Hi, so I'm Dan. I'm an associate product manager here. I'm here to talk to you about the SEO finalization. I'm aware right now this is just the evil project that's standing between you guys and lunch, so I'll try and keep it brief. Where are the slides?
Right here.
Ah, marvelous. Okay, so I'm a product manager, so I think in user stories. So I'm going to give a brief rundown of what we're doing. So this is the user story for the SEO finalization, basically. I would like all of our users of our sites to have truly global accounts, because they don't right now. Most of them do. Most of the people in this room do. Some of you don't. We're fixing that. So basically we're doing 5 different things right now. Global rename, a facility to request a rename, the ability to log in with your old credentials, global account merge, and the finalization script. So I'll run through each of these, tell you why it is that we're doing it, and where we are with it. So the first user stories we have here are, I would like to rename my account globally without having to file hundreds of rename requests, because that was the process before. If you wanted to rename a global account, go to every wiki you've ever edited and ask the bureaucrats. And we know there are hundreds. And as a steward, I would like to be able to rename accounts globally with a single click. That's really cool. So this actually is deployed and done, and is actually even being used by staff to rename people to new staff accounts. So it's working really well. So woohoo! Step 1 done. So, here, the next story is, as a user who will be forcibly renamed, I'd like a hassle-free way to request a new name. So if you are one of the people affected by the SEO finalization, you don't have a global account, and the process to get a new global account is to go to Meta, the wiki that you can't access because you don't have a global account, and request a name. So you have to create a new account. So now you've got 2. That's a bit silly. And the other thing is, potentially there are like 4.3 million people that are going to request renames. Potentially. We don't think it's actually going to be that many. But 4.3 million rename requests is a lot to ask the stewards to do. And for the most part, most of the overhead of a rename request is actually verifying the user's identity on Meta is the same as their identity on the other wiki. So not only is that a complex process for the new users to cope with, go to your user page, make an edit, go to the history, pull the diff out, post the diff on Meta, the stewards then have to make sure that it's all true as well. So this will just be a form that users can fill in. It will be generic as well, but it's mainly for the SEO finalization. They fill in the form, it sends the request to the stewards can do it. Really simple. So what we've got here right now, the current status of this project is we actually have the form that's that lets you make the requests is built, crashes when you use it, but that's a different point. And then we're going to work on the second form, and it's all going to be hooked up. Brian, the engineer working on this, is actually quite hopeful he'll have this done within a couple of days. And then we're going to prettify it and everything. We just want to make sure it works end to end before we make it pretty. So the next one. As a user who was forcibly renamed without my knowledge, because that's what we're going to have to do for these people that have clashing accounts, I would like to log in with my old username so that I'm not locked out of my account, because wouldn't it suck if we just lock people out of their accounts? And this one, as a product manager, I'd like the SEO finalization to not lock users out of their accounts, because otherwise I would be a bad product manager. So what happens here is if you've been forcibly renamed, you can log in and not even know that you've been forcibly renamed, which is nice because we can't contact everyone, unfortunately. We're going to try, but it's just practical. So then when they log in, they're told, you've been renamed. We had to do it, sorry. And And then we put them to the request to rename form. See? Lovely experience. So yeah, so this actually works right now, which is nice. We need to revise the pros because right now it's just like the engineers first stab at it. So, but yeah, that's cool. Next is, as a user with multiple unattached accounts that were globalized, I'd like to collect them all into a single unified account. So if you're unlucky enough to be affected by the SEL finalization, all of your accounts will be globalized. So if you previously had 20 accounts that clashed, you will now have 20 global accounts. And people don't want 20 global accounts. They want one global account. What's the point of having 20 global accounts if you have to log in and log out every time you go to a different wiki, right? So this way you can merge them all into one. And the current way, there is a process to do this right now. It creates more clashes, which we don't want just to be having to do a second finalization. So the current stage of this is that it actually works. We're just refining the UI a bit. It's a bit clunky. So yeah, and we're hoping to get some testing on that soon. Next. So this is the finalization script, the fifth one. So as a user, I'd like to be able to log into all wikis with a single unified name. So we're writing a script that will actually do the finalization, globalize everyone's accounts, and then in theory, once we run it, we'll be done. So that would be nice. We've just begun developing this now. So I'll just run quickly through the team and what they're doing. So we've got Brian Davis, who's doing the request to rename in the old credentials feature. Kunal, also known as Lego KTM, who's doing global rename, global merge, and the finalization script. Chris Stipe, who's doing code review for these guys and is also a central auth guru. You've got to appreciate that. So we've run into a lot of very strange things with central auth, and he's helped us fix them, which is really, really good. So we've also got Keegan, who's doing community engagement, speaking to the stewards, speaking to the bureaucrats, making sure that they're all up to date. We've got Brandon, who's done our lovely designs for all of the stuff that's facing our users. And then there's me, who's the product owner and sort of the Scrum Master for the team. So I think that's it.
Any questions for Dan before we wrap?
I imagine there's someone IRC.
Kevin.
What about global user pages? So I have one user page for all my global accounts.
That's outside the scope of this project. Certainly something that would be nice.
So
but
most of these what about things are outside the scope. There's a lot of other things related to identity that are kind of broken, including like lack of global user pages, the fact that the private wiki logins and Wikimedia Foundation logins are completely separate. SEL finalization is sadly not going to solve all your problems, but it will solve one very big one, which is that we still have this huge mess of accounts that are not even part of the central database, which would have to be special cased for every feature that relies on you being a certain person.
So it's a precursor to that, because now if we develop that post finalization, we don't have to worry about the edge case of, well, what if this person doesn't have a global account? Being able to make that assumption makes things a lot easier. So,
does this have a life beyond this project? I.e., will this be able to be used for people to more autonomously rename themselves on a regular basis?
So not rename themselves, but many of the things that we're working on can be generalized. And in fact, for example, the request to rename feature actually is generalized. If you get directed to it through one of the SUL routes, like for example, that you were forcibly renamed, it displays special prose at the top that explains SUL and what's happened. If you just go to the form straight up, it just is a form that gives you that you can fill into request to rename, and it adds a reason field at the bottom. If you're doing SUL, then we don't put that reason field in because we already know the reason. So many of these things actually are generic. We're hoping they will be used because the rename process is really clunky, but that's not the primary use case here. It was a nice to have to put that in, and it wasn't much work. So, yeah. But for example, global rename, which was developed primarily for this, is currently being used to migrate everyone to proper staff accounts. So there are plenty of use cases other than the ones we're building these things for.
Okay, who wants to ask additional questions before lunch?
Yes, that's the way to put it.
Hi. Does it work without third-party cookies? Does it work without third-party cookies?
Without third-party cookies, did you say? I have no idea. The login won't work without cookies, but it should work. I mean, I'm not really sure I understand the question.
Okay, third-party cookies are used to track users
a
lot by advertising companies. So yes, of course, but in the browser you have security to disallow this. And as far as I know, currently it does not work if the single logging system if you disallow third-party cookie because the cookie comes.
James said that's a bug in Firefox. So yeah, I'm a bit confused about the question. We don't use third-party cookies. If you've got cookies turned off, it won't work. But you know, that's just reality. So yeah. Any more questions before lunch? Okay. Thank you.
That's a wrap. Thanks, everyone.